Hi, my name is Jennifer Christensen. I'm in Music Theory 1, which is taught by Professor Olson, and I will be analyzing Franz Schubert's Trout Quintet today. In the early 1800s, many composers, including Haydn, Beethoven, Hummel, and Schubert, were composing pieces for chamber ensembles. Chamber music was extremely popular during this time period because professional and amateur musicians could gather together and play beautiful music without the necessity of gathering together a huge ensemble. These small groups would gather at a home of the patron of the arts or somewhere that had enough room to host the gatherings. Most chamber music was written for string quartets, but woodwinds and various combinations could be used. Composing chamber music allowed the composer to create new sounds and experiment with different colors. A man by the name of Sylvester Baumgartner was a patron of the arts in Steyr, Austria, and a chamber music enthusiast. Baumgartner was a concert organizer, an amateur cellist, and wind player. He had a music salon in his home where he invited fellow musicians to play. During the summer of 1819, when Franz Schubert was 22, he spent time in Baumgartner's home playing chamber music with these musicians. Baumgartner admired Schubert's music, especially Die Forelle, the Trout. This was a song written from a poem by Daniel Schubert, who is not related to Franz Schubert. This poem says, "In a clear brooklet, with cheerful haste, the moody trout shot by like an arrow. I stood on the embankment, in quiet contentment, watching the merry little fish bathe in the clear brooklet. An angler with a rod stood on the bank, coldly watching the little fish frolic about. As long as the clear water, thought I, is not disturbed, he will not ensnare the trout with his hook. Finally the thief, tired of waiting, slyly he muddied the brook. And sooner than I thought, the rod began to twitch. And the fish wriggled on the line, and I, my blood boiling, contemplated this deceived little one." Baumgartner asked Schubert to write chamber version of Die Forelle similar to Johann Nepomuk Hummel's Septet in D minor, opus 74. Hummel was a favorite composer at Baumgartner gatherings, and also wrote a quintet version of the same piece, Septet in D minor, opus 74. Hummel's piece and the Trout Quintet have many similarities, although Schubert wrote 5 movements while the Hummel piece only has 4. Although Schubert completed the Trout Quintet in Vienna, Austria, he actually started writing it when he was in Steyr, Austria. The first performance of the Trout Quintet was also in Steyr, Austria, in Sylvester Baumgartner's house. Schubert lived in Vienna but hated being in the city and enjoyed these trips to a more rural and peaceful setting. He described the town Steyr as unimaginably lovely. The peace and beauty of Steyr influenced Schubert greatly, and it can be heard throughout the Trout Quintet. In Steyr there are 2 rivers, low mountains, fresh air, and even now it's still a tourist destination. The Trout Quintet follows these elements in all of the different instruments. The piece in its entirety has a fresh and peaceful feeling. These pictures that you see right now on the screen, they were actually taken by my uncle while he lived in Steyr, Austria. One is in the winter and one is in the springish time. This was the first time that Franz Schubert had written an instrumental version of one of his songs, but it's not the last. Franz Schubert wrote the Trout Quintet in 1819 when he was 22, although it wasn't published until 1829, which was a year after his death. The instrumentation for this piece is somewhat unusual for the time period. A usual instrumentation for a chamber ensemble was piano, 2 violins, viola, and cello. His, on the other hand, used piano, violin, viola, cello, and double bass. Schubert wrote his instrumentation this way to accommodate the group of musicians who gathered at Baumgartner's house. The Trout Quintet has 5 movements: Allegro vivace in sonata form, Andante in F major, Scherzo, presto, Andantino, Allegretto in D major, and Allegro gusto. The first movement of the Trout Quintet is in sonata allegro form, has exposition, development, and recapitulation. The exposition begins with the piano playing an A major ascending arpeggio, which is motif 1, in triplets in the introduction. Triplets are very prominent in this movement. The violins come in at measure 3 with a figure that begins sol, fi, sol, do, which is motif 2. These motifs are echoed and fragmented by every instrument with exception to the bass throughout the introduction. At measure 11, the introduction suddenly changes keys from A major to F major. F major is a flat 6 of A major. The common tones of these two major chords is A, and that's why the sudden key change works. Theme 1, which is measure 25, starts back in the key of A major. The piano has same triplet arpeggio as in the introduction. Then, like the introduction, violins come in with sol, fi, sol, but then they jump to a major 6 to mi. From measures 53 to 63, there is a series of modulations. These modulations take the piece from its tonic, A major, to its dominant, which is E major. This is an expected key change because most exposition second themes are in the dominant key. Although this change is expected, the way Schubert modulated into A major is unusual. For example, in measures 59 through 60, Schubert goes from E7 to G. The beginning of the second theme starts with an ascending fourth played by the cello. The violins imitate this same motif one measure later. Throughout this whole section, the piano consistently plays triplets. Another part of the second theme starts at measure 88. In the second part of the second theme, the piano introduces a new melody, but as a solo. At measure 95, the violin takes over the piano's melody. At measure 104, the piano stops playing triplets for a time, and the violin, viola, and cello take turns playing triplets from 104 to 107. In measures 104 to 105, the expected chord progression would be 1-5-1, but instead, after the 5 chord, Schubert goes abruptly to a C major chord, which is the flat 3 of the key. Although this is unexpected, it isn't especially jarring to the ear because E major and C major have a common tone of E. After only 4 measures of C major, the key goes back to E major. In measure 116, the piano starts playing scale passages while the violin, viola, and cello play in harmony a broken E major chord in a dotted rhythm. From measure 117 to 120, the violin and piano trade back and forth, with one playing the scale passages while the other plays dotted rhythm chords. Schubert must have liked the 1 to flat 3 chord relationship because in measures 137 to 138, he uses this same chord relationship again by going from B7 to D major, which is the same as in measures 105 and 106. The exposition ends at measure 148 in the dominant key of E major. Schubert also liked the 1 to flat 6 relationship because after the E major chord ending the exposition section, he starts the development section at measure 149 in the key of C major. At measure 151, the violins have the same motif in half notes that they played in the introduction, which is sol, fi, sol, do. Then at measure 159, the piano takes over. At measure 169, the piano plays the same type of scale passages played in measure 116, except this time it's played in triplets. By measure 183, the piece modulates to E flat and G minor. The key signature changes to E flat major and the key is firmly established. Another unusual chord change occurs between measures 188 through 189, when the piece suddenly changes from a C7 chord to an A flat chord, which is another flat 6 chord. A triplet motif begins the piano at measure 191 and is then passed around for the rest of the development section. This triplet motif is played in different keys to modulate into the recapitulation section. In measure 195, the key signature changes to C major and different chords are used to prepare for the recapitulation, which is B, a B major, E minor, D flat major, and F sharp minor. The first theme of the recapitulation begins in D major. Although this arrival point is the strongest in the piece, it is rather unusual that it is written in D major instead of A major, which is the key that the exposition is in. The second theme of the recapitulation, though, begins in measure 249 in the tonic key of A major. The recapitulation is similar to the exposition and ends with a strong A major chord. The Trout Quintet is Schubert's most famous chamber piece. It has remained popular throughout time because of enchanting melodies, brilliant chord progressions, and beautiful harmonic movement. When I was a baby, whenever I'd get fussy, my parents would put on a CD of the Trout Quintet to play. Never once did it fail to calm me. The Trout Quintet has always had a special place in my heart, and still to this day, I play a recording of the Trout Quintet whenever I'm stressed to calm myself. The Trout Quintet is a powerful piece of music, and it will forever have the ability to calm, entertain, and inspire. I hope you liked this video, and I hope it was enjoyable as well as educational. Thank you for watching.